If you're serious about military history, fieldcraft, and the real mechanics of survival under fire, this is an episode you'll want to stay with from start to finish. Welcome back to After the Sirens, a channel dedicated to what soldiers actually did when doctrine failed, weather turned hostile, and survival depended on improvisation. Before we get into the substance, make sure you subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with the conflict or field skill you want us to break down next. Your support keeps this archive growing, and your insights help steer future deep dives. World War II was not only fought with rifles, tanks and aircraft, it was fought against snow that froze men alive in the Ardennes, rain that turned Italy into a quagmire, and mud that swallowed shelters whole on the Eastern Front. Standard-issue tents were often unavailable, destroyed, or completely inadequate. What kept soldiers alive night after night were improvised shelter techniques refined through brutal trial and error. These were not comfort solutions. They were survival hacks, and many of them still outperform modern assumptions about field shelter when conditions turn hostile. Exposure killed more soldiers than enemy bullets in several campaigns. Trench foot, hypothermia, frostbite and exhaustion all stemmed from inadequate shelter. German medical reports from the Eastern Front repeatedly emphasized that men who could insulate themselves from ground moisture and wind survived longer and fought more effectively. Shelter was not rest, it was force preservation. Every hack discussed here solved one problem above all else: keeping the body dry and breaking the wind. One of the most effective shelter adaptations was abandoning above-ground structures entirely. Soldiers quickly learned that digging down was safer and warmer than building up. A shallow, slit trench widened just enough for a body reduced wind exposure dramatically. Soil temperature just below the surface is more stable than air temperature, even in winter. German, Soviet and Allied troops all adopted this instinctively. In practical terms, soldiers scraped out a body-length depression, lined it with branches, ammunition crates, or even helmets flattened into the dirt, then covered the top with ponchos, doors, or corrugated metal scavenged from ruins. Modern application is, well, straightforward. If caught in cold or storm conditions with limited gear, prioritize ground excavation first, insulation second, and overhead cover last. Wind kills faster than cold alone. The humble poncho became one of the most versatile shelter tools of the war. US troops in particular relied heavily on ponchos snapped together to form lean-tos or low-profile bivouacs. The key lesson was angle and drainage. Soldiers learned quickly that a steep angle shed rain, while flat tops collected it and collapsed. Field manuals were rewritten mid-war to emphasize airflow and runoff. A single poncho pitched low, anchored tightly on the windward side, and raised slightly on the leeward side, allowed moisture to escape while blocking rain. Today, this applies directly to tarp shelters. Pitch low, slope aggressively, and, well, always leave a controlled ventilation gap to prevent condensation. Ground moisture was as dangerous as rain. Soldiers sleeping directly on soil lost body heat at an alarming rate. The workaround was constant improvisation. Anything that created an air gap became bedding. Pine branches, straw, Spent shell casings, wooden doors, or even packed snow blocks were used to lift bodies off wet ground. Soviet troops famously used layered birch branches in winter, creating thick mats that trapped air even when frozen. For modern survivalists, this really reinforces a non-negotiable rule. Insulation beneath you matters more than insulation above you. Even just a few inches of debris can, dramatically reduce heat loss. Fire was often impossible due to enemy observation. In snowy environments, soldiers learned to let snow work for them instead of against them. Snow trenches and collapsed roof shelters provided insulation while remaining nearly invisible. Finnish and German troops both used compacted snow walls reinforced with skis or rifles. The snow blocked wind entirely and reflected body heat inward. A small breathing hole prevented carbon dioxide buildup. Modern cold weather survival training still uses the same principle. Snow, when compacted, insulates better than many fabrics and requires no external materials. In Italy and northwest Europe, mud was relentless. Shelters that did not account for drainage quickly became water traps. Soldiers learned to dig shallow drainage channels around their sleeping areas, sloping away downhill. This simple adjustment prevented pooling and reduced disease. They also elevated entrances slightly higher than sleeping areas, so water flowed out instead of in. For anyone applying this today, the lesson is, basic terrain reading. Never build at the lowest point. Always anticipate where water will move after hours of rain, not just minutes. Urban combat zones offered walls, but introduced new risks. Roofs collapsed, upper floors funneled shrapnel, and windows amplified blast pressure. Soldiers adapted by sheltering in basements or ground floors, reinforced with rubble. Rather than clearing debris, they piled it against walls to absorb shock. Doorways were sealed with furniture, and firing ports were cut at ground level. This was passive defense through mass. Modern parallels exist in disaster sheltering. Heavier materials absorb force better than open space. Camouflage netting, brush, and even laundry lines served a dual role. They concealed positions while breaking wind and dispersing rainfall. Soldiers learned that irregular surfaces reduced water accumulation and airflow. Layering vegetation over ponchos prevented pooling and reduced noise from rain. Today, this principle applies directly to tarp shelters. Adding natural debris increases durability, insulation, and concealment simultaneously. One of the most overlooked lessons is that Second World War shelters were rarely permanent. Soldiers, they modified them daily as conditions changed. A shelter that worked in dry cold, it failed in wet thaw. Adaptation, really, was continuous. This mindset is absolutely critical for modern survivalists. The goal, after all, is not perfection, but responsiveness. It's important to, evaluate drainage, wind direction and ground condition every single day, and then adjust accordingly. These techniques, they were born under pressure, refined through loss, and preserved simply because they worked. They require minimal tools, rely on physics rather than fancy gear, and above all, they prioritize survival over comfort. Whether you're studying military history or practicing fieldcraft, these lessons remain relevant even today, because the weather hasn't changed, and honestly, neither has human vulnerability. If you found this breakdown valuable, do consider subscribing to After the Sirens, share this episode with fellow historians and survivalists, and leave a comment about the next topic you'd like to see dissected at this level. This channel exists to preserve hard-earned knowledge, not myths, and your engagement really does keep that mission alive.